Good evening, everyone. Hello. We're going to get this program started real quick. You all find a seat. There's some seats in the middle. Welcome to Northport Yacht Club. My name is Robert Polizzo. I'm the Commodore of this yacht club. We have a great presentation for you this evening. Before we start, one of the housekeeping rule, this is being recorded. So we have to let you guys know that. So it's reviewed for future purposes, so it's being recorded. Don't say anything you don't want recorded. We have some great speakers tonight. Our Women's Committee and Sustainability Committee have put together a great presentation. Some of the issues that Northport Yacht Club has done in the past is our oyster farm, which started last summer with the Cornell Cooperative, as well as our rain gardens with the Village of Northport and the Citizens Campaign for the Environment. Both great projects to clean up our harbors. We also have a vertical garden, which we started about 3 years ago, where we grow fresh herbs and vegetables on our premises to be used in our kitchen. That being said, I'd like to welcome you once again to the Northport Yacht Club and enjoy tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Commodore. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Women's Committee at Northport Yacht Club, we welcome you for, it's either the 8th or 9th annual 8th, thank you, Stephanie, that this presentation started from the Women's Committee. So we're very excited that the momentum has picked up and grown. We actually had to have a waiting list for this presentation. So this is a good thing. Also, I just want to quick give, as we will, we have a wonderful group of distinguished guests that Stephanie will be up to introduce, but I'd like to, if you don't mind, we're going to give a round of applause to our galley manager, Alberto Espinal, and our staff for preparing everything for today. So without further ado, Stephanie, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Clark. Thank you.
I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to this event and showing your enthusiasm and desire to have good water quality. It's very important, and I think you're making a statement when you come here. I would like to recognize and thank some of the officials and dignitaries that are in the audience. I'd like to thank Mayor Koch from the Northport Village, who's here. Dave Weber, who is from the Northport Village as a trustee of the Northport Village. I'd also like to thank Garrett Chelius from the County Convention and Lisa Scott, from the president of the League of Women Voters of Suffolk County. Jackie Moran, who's the executive office for the Greater Huntington Council of Yachts and Boating Club. Julian Gutman, are you here, Julian? Thank you. Coming from Practice Leaders in Huntington. Now, did I forget somebody on this list? All right. All right. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your support for water quality. We have an extraordinary group of speakers, scientists, researchers, and government officials. We have Professor Christopher Gobler, SUNY Distinguished Professor, Endowed Chair of Coastal Ecology and the Conservation School of Maritime and Atmospheric Science at Stony Brook University. I had to read that from the paper. He will talk about the status of the water and the research he has done. David Anvil, VP of Water Protection at Save the Sound, is also here, as well as Maureen Murphy, Executive Program Manager, Citizens Campaign for the Environment. They will all discuss the waterways, problems, and solutions. We have officials from different levels of government. Peter Scully, Deputy County Executive, New York State Assemblyman Keith Brown, and he will be coming back. He's delayed in arriving, so he was here and then he's going to come back later. And the town of Huntington supervisor Edmund Smith is not here yet either. So But I'm sure he's gonna be here. So, they will all examine what has been done and what can be done with our water. And we will examine how the Environmental Bond Act, which was passed in the November election, might be able to help us in the solutions of some of these problems, and we'll examine that. So I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank all the people who are, all of our speakers, for coming here and sharing what they know with us. Dr. Goldman.
And presumably my slides will come up at some point, but anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a beautiful evening. It's great to be with a group of people who are so concerned about their waterways. And yeah, I think I've been here almost every time. Last year I had to be virtual. So, but it's good to be back in person and good to see everybody. Yeah, just got to advance. All right, correct. Here we go. Okay, so the first good part of my talk is bad news, but I'm gonna stick around for the good news stuff. So let's just get started. It's always important to think about all of Long Island as a watershed, Northport, the village, but anywhere. It's all a watershed. And that water that hits land is so important. That's our drinking water source, right? So whatever happens to it on land, however it's transformed, that's going to be what we're drinking. And even if you have whatever people call it, whether it's city water or Suffolk County Water Authority water, it doesn't come very far from where you are. It's usually a mile, 2 miles, 3 at the most. It's not being piped from far. So everything we're doing on land affects our drinking water. But it's even more important than that, because what we don't extract to drink then discharges into our surface waters, right? And it can have a very strong effect on what's going on in our surface waters, from the small to the entire ecosystem. And we know over time, of course, the population in Suffolk County has grown enormously, and that with time that has had an effect on the quality of our groundwater, which again is our drinking water source. And you can see we're now on average about 3.8 milligrams per liter of nitrate in our drinking water. And that's almost rarefied air from a national perspective. So this graph here is the references cut off, but it's from a scientist from Duke and some other collaborators, put together all the data from the entire nation. What's the concentration of nitrate in the drinking water of US citizens? So if you look at that first bar and you follow it over to the left, 200 million people. That's about 2/3 of the US. People are drinking water with less than 1 milligram per liter of nitrate. You can see in the 3 to 3.5 milligrams per liter range is where we are on average in Suffolk County. So that's pretty high. And there's a few important facts about this. EPA would say, as long as it's less than 10 milligrams per liter, everybody's okay, because that's what can cause what's known as blue baby syndrome. But at Northport University, as I'm sure you're all aware, we have a medical school. And so I work with not a lot of doctors, but some doctors, particularly epidemiologists. They're more worried about nitrate at lower levels, and for good reasons. There's emerging research, and I put them up here. They're on the one hand, they're epidemiological studies, so they're correlative. But there's a lot of research going up there. You can see all the different references that are showing 2 human health dangers from nitrate levels, not at 10 milligrams per liter, but at lower levels. And that is specifically, there's been correlations between higher instances of different gastrointestinal cancers with high levels of nitrate, and not at 10, but at 3 and higher, and also potentially birth defects. And again, this is really emerging research, but it's stuff that epidemiologists at the medical school are worried about and starting to think about. So upshot being, we want nitrate levels as low as possible. This graph here shows you different drinking water sources across Suffolk County. And I have 2 red bars here to show that the Suffolk County Water Authority water in Northport and East Northport is high. It's at the high end, right? So again, we want to get those levels down as low as possible. Okay, but I'm a marine scientist, so I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm an ocean doctor, so to speak. And so let's talk about effects on the ocean. So we know where that nitrogen is coming from in Suffolk County, and we'll hear more about that later, but it's coming from wastewater, on-site wastewater primarily. And there's been many studies that have shown this, and once it discharges, beyond what it can do for human health and drinking water, it can affect the marine ecosystem. And so why would we worry about those higher levels of nitrogen? Well, I'll start with this map here. I put out this map every year. This is the 2022 map. It shows monitoring that my lab does across all of Long Island. And it's just a snapshot. This is 4 months in 2022. And essentially what it's showing are harmful algal blooms across Long Island and low oxygen zones, also called hypoxic or dead zones. Upshot being, it's all over Long Island. There are problems. And if you can zone in and see where Northport is, and don't hit that button. If you want to, no, okay. If you can see where Northport is, you can see there's a lot of concentric rings all on top of each other there. And two of those rings, or several of them, are from what we call harmful algal blooms. It's the overgrowth of algae in the water. It can discolor the water, but importantly, it can also be a human health issue. So the algae on the left all make what are known as biotoxins. The ones on the right are what we call ecosystem disruptive. Either way, it's something we don't want happening in our waters, and they're all stimulated by nitrogen. And that's what's showing here. So the higher the levels of nitrogen are, the more intense these events can get, and sometimes the more toxic, because the toxins they make are nitrogen-rich compounds. So just to highlight a couple of them, one is known as alexandrium. It makes this compound on the right, saxitoxin. That's a neurotoxin. It's actually 1,000 times more potent than cyanide, and can get into shellfish. And in some cases, when people aren't very careful, because, for example, in Alaska, the coastline is actually bigger, I think, than the entire East Coast, maybe the rest of the United States. It's so big, hard to monitor there, and it's led to serious human health issues with regards to that exact algae and that exact toxin. That algae is widespread across Long Island, and we found it very frequently in Northport. And it's caused shellfish bed closures across Long Island as well. In fact, the biggest one that has ever occurred has been in this water body here. So from Northport Harbor, Huntington Harbor, and Northport Bay, Huntington Bay. As a quick update, actually right now, there are 4 biotoxin closures on Long Island because of that algae. So you can see where it is there. The upper right is Flanders Bay and all the tributaries west of there. That's more than 1,000 acres. Same is true for Shinnecock Bay, the western extent there, and then further out in Laconic Exploration, Jockey Creek, Town Creek, and also Terry and Meeting House Creek. So this is it's on the one hand, it's a spring phenomenon. So it happens in spring, but this is a particularly bad year, probably partly linked also to the weather, the warmer than usual winter we had. But we know this happens because of nitrogen. Just to show you, I won't go into this data, but if you wanted to follow the graph, what this graph is showing you is an experiment where we took water actually from Northport Harbor and we added nothing as a control, phosphorus, and different types of nitrogen. Every time we added nitrogen, we got more cells and we got more toxins. So it's a very, very clear link. And you can see the conclusion here. We even were able to pinpoint the nitrogen as being specifically from sewage in this particular case. Now, a little bit of happy news. This is last year's data. And so there was algae in the water last year in 2022, but the levels were low. You can see at 300 cells per liter. I'll just pop up 2 different points. We used to get as high as 1,000,000 cells per liter here. So you can see this data is only a few hundred. This year, I don't have all the data. We're still actually collecting it. I just got data literally on the way here. We had 30,000 cells per liter earlier in April, but it looks like it's on the decline. And there's been no shellfish bed closure here. My prediction is that there probably won't be one. Maybe I shouldn't be predicting. So that's actually good news. We're in a much better place today than where we were, say, a decade ago or 15 years ago. So that's happy news. There is another harmful algae we track. We call it dinophysis. It also makes a toxin a little bit less dangerous because it's a gastrointestinal toxin. We have found the toxin and the organism in Northport. This is just showing the levels of the toxin we found in different places. Different types of shellfish. Again, this is a very similar graph what I showed before. If we add more nitrogen, whether it's in the form of ammonium or glutamine, or even from water from a sewage treatment plant with nitrogen, we get more of these cells. We did see decent levels of these cells last year. And you can see the dates here are more towards June, so we can't even, it's in the water here. The levels are not very high. We know they'll increase come June, we just don't know how high. But again, this is another ordinance that used to get to millions of cells per liter. Now we're only in the thousands, so that's actually good news, and it's definitely progress. Final thing to talk about is low oxygen. When we know when we have algal blooms and they degrade, it can lead to low oxygen conditions. I talked about that before. The DEC has very clear language on the levels of oxygen they want to see in the water bodies. They really don't want to get getting less than 4.8 milligrams per liter and never want to see less than 3 milligrams per liter. We did have an occurrence of low oxygen and fish kills with it last summer. The yellow dots are places where we had fish kills. We actually had 50 fish kills last summer, with the densest concentration really being between Hempstead. Is that me? I'll try to zip along here. Here's what it looked like. And these are the levels of oxygen that we saw late last summer. So very, very low levels, below that standard, and contributing to the fish kills. So that's all the bad news. Although actually mixed in there, you have to see there actually is some very good news. The levels of those toxic algae are much better now than they were a decade ago. So that's happy news. And the closures aren't happening here right now; they're happening out. But not only is nitrogen making things worse, but we know it can make things better. So if you can see this plot here of Long Island Sound, the plots on the left are from the 90s. The plots on the right are from since we upgraded all the sewage treatment plants. And what I want to draw your attention to is that big area of Long Island Sound that's actually right outside of Northport that used to always be part of the massive dead zone. That's actually shrunk and is actually almost gone. And how did that happen? Well, EPA came in with the Long Island Sound study plan that said, let's cut nitrogen loads by 60%. And some people were skeptical, like, oh, what's that going to do? Well, you can see what it did. And in fact, as a scientist, I love to look at trends like this. This is the change in the amount of nitrogen loading and the size of that dead zone with time, right? And there's some wiggle there, but show me another data set that tracks together like that in an ecosystem setting, fairly rare. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is something that Peter will probably talk about as well, so I won't put too much time into it. But Suffolk County has an incredible program. I call Suffolk County's program for septic systems now the best in the country. And leaders across the country, and it is worthy of applause. There really isn't, there really is, it's a program to be modeled after for the entire country. They did their homework, they've got the science right, and they've got a plan. You're going to hear all about it, so I won't talk about it. I will just mention, I am head also at the university called the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology. You can see our tagline, harnessing science to engineer clean water for the protection of public health and the environment in New York and beyond. We've developed an type of on-site septic system. I'll just mention really quickly. They're called nitrogen removing biofilters. They're super simple, sand and wood chips and a single pump. And we just finished testing and had through that provisional testing, you can see all these bars. That's the nitrogen coming out of different septic systems. The red bars are systems we developed, and the one that we just had approved has actually the best effluent when it comes to nitrogen of all the systems tested in the county. And in addition, it removes other things as well. Of course, there's a lot of things in wastewater we don't want to drink. And so you can see the long list of compounds here that our systems remove, and you can see the percent removals. In every case, the percent removal it achieves is better than a sewage treatment plant. So we're excited about these. We just found out, what's today, on April 25th, so we're just 2 days ago, so it's been a good week. That these systems have now been approved for provisional use in Suffolk County, and we've got 3 different groups that can install those. So either myself or the county can help you figure that out. So I'm done. My conclusions are that we've got problems with nitrate in drinking water, and we know where those problems come from. It's from on-site septic systems. We also know that the nitrogen has led to intense harmful algal blooms, but we also know that they're promoted by nitrogen, but we also know that they're significantly less intense than they were a decade ago. We do know that the oxygen levels continue to be a problem, however, in the harbor. That was associated with those fish kills. And the last thing is that upgrading septic systems is the path for improving water quality even further. So I thank you for your attention and the invite.
Good evening. My name is David Ansel. I'm the Vice President of Water Protection at Save the Sound. Thank you all for having me here tonight. Special thanks to the Northport Yacht Club. Much appreciated. And another congratulations to Professor Gobler. We were talking earlier about Stony Brook getting awarded the climate campus in Governor's Island. Having a good week. Really quickly, I just want to talk about the Long Island Sound on a higher level. The Long Island Sound is a vital and cherished resource for millions of New York and Connecticut residents. It's an ecological treasure, home to countless marine species, including 170 known species of fish, as well as sea turtles, seals, whales, dozens of species of migratory birds. The Long Island Sound provides an extraordinary range of recreational opportunities, fishing, boating, I think you're familiar with, swimming at more than 100 beaches up to the public. And it's also an economic engine to the region. Brings hundreds of thousands of jobs to the region and billions of dollars a year. So for these reasons and more, it's vital that we continue to protect the waters of the Long Island Sound. Now I'm going to do a quick commercial for Save the Sound, so you know who we are and what we do. Our mission is to restore and protect all that impacts the Long Island Sound's regional environment, rivers and shorelines, wetlands and forests, the air we breathe, and of course, the water of the Sound itself. What makes us truly unique among regional environmental organizations is the scope of the work that we do. It's water protection, ecological restoration and resilience work, climate, land conservation, and environmental justice. We have many tools in our toolkit to execute on our mission. We use science and data, environmental monitoring, engineering, legislative advocacy, community engagement, and when necessary, legal action. On a personal note, I grew up swimming, fishing, boating, and lifeguarding on the Long Island Sound, and it's a special place to me. And I recently left almost 30 years of law practice in New York City to become a full-time advocate at Save the Sound and work on water quality. So I'm really excited to be part of this. So onward and upward. At Save the Sound, we do have a science, water quality, water testing team led by Peter Linderoth as the director of water quality. And we do lots and lots of pathogen and bacteria testing. We also do the Unified Water Study, which it was a grant from the EPA to the Long Island Sound Study to Save the Sound to test the harbors and bays all around Long Island Sound. And this probably will mean more to Dr. Gobler than the rest of us, but we test for dissolved oxygen and these other critical indicators of the ecological health of the Sound. And we truly are all over the Sound and hopefully expanding, and we work with partner groups all over the Sound to get these testing, to get the water tested, bring it to our lab in Larchmont and do the data and the science there. If you're ever passing through Westchester, please let us know. We'd love to have you come to the office and see the spectacular laboratory that we now have. We work with, as I said, providers from all over the Sound. It's been extremely busy in the office this week because they've been in for training to learn how to use the equipment and make sure the standardization and all the science and the testing that they're doing is standardized and correct. And we want to give a special shout out to Cornell Cooperative Extension, who does the water testing here in your harbor in Northport. So thank you to the Cornell Cooperative Extension. So all this science and data and the is amazing, and it's to find out what's going on in the water. And I think Dr. Gobler just gave you a great presentation and showed you a lot of that. What we do is we like to take the data and advocate and try to get the public aware of what's going on so that we can get the policymakers aware of what's going on, so we can get the money and the resources and the policies to the Long Island Sound to make sure that we can continue to protect the water and have the resources to do that. So one of the tools we use is the Long Island Sound report card, which we've been doing since 2016. And we just issued another one in 2022. This is a slide which on a very high level, and I'm not a scientist, tells a story about what's going on with water quality in the open segments of the sound. So from the right to the east is green and A+, in the middle an A, and then as you work west to the Western Basin, it's a B+. Where we are in the Eastern Narrows is still showing as a C under this methodology. And then all the way into the west is an F, which is the Western Narrows, which is New York City, Bronx, and Queens. So again, on a really high level, two simple ways to just think about it is the further east you are, the population density is lower, there's less wastewater, there's less sewage, there's less pollution getting in the water. And you're getting flush from the Atlantic Ocean that's coming through. So that really helps keep the water clean. And as you get further west, you have problems in Westchester with terrible infrastructure problems and sewage leaks. And here in this community, we have issues with septic and other problems. And New York City simply just doesn't have just too many people and not enough sewage treatment. So that's the story we're telling with that slide. These are the grades from the Unified Water Study. I won't take you through them, and you can't read that anyway, but safeandsound.org. Our report card, we have some hard copies of it here, but you can go online and see that. This is a slide on our website called the Sound Health Explorer, which is a link on our website. And you can actually dig in and see the grades for each embayment that has been tested. This is Northport Harbor. Again, it's too small to read, but it identifies that the big problem here is, we've got a dissolved oxygen score of F. So that continues to be an issue. I think our data is probably a year behind Dr. Gobler's, but similar story. So the challenges for water quality, we agree it's wastewater is number one, and stormwater runoff is also a huge issue. Water running off hard surfaces all over our communities that gets into our water and gets into the sound, sometimes through the wastewater system, sometimes not, but it's still contaminating our water. Climate change, I view as a triple threat. Not only does the frequency and the severity of the storms that we're seeing exacerbate wastewater and stormwater problems as it overwhelms the system, it's also a fact that the water temperature in sound is rising and going to rise. And so that creates more oxygen problems, which can lead to more hypoxia in the water. Nitrogen and fertilizer, we talked about that. Plastics and contaminants, we're very concerned about going forward also. The good news is we know what the solutions are because, since the 1980s, there has been significant improvement in many areas of sound. We know that fixing infrastructure is important. Renewable Rikers is a coalition we're in to try to make sure that Rikers Island gets converted from correctional facility to a modernized treatment facility, which we think will have a really material positive impact on the Western Narrows, and maybe we can get that F, that red score, changed to a better color in our picture. Improving climate policies, which we lobby for in Albany and Hartford, fertilizer reduction, plastic reduction, and then the next two bullets are really the core of the work that we do, which is to continue to do water testing to make sure we understand what's going on in the water and communicate that out. And then the next one is our Soundkeeper program. We have 4 boats on the water doing pollution monitoring and troubleshooting and looking for outfalls and trying to understand where the pollution is coming from and what kind of pollution it is. And then the very last one there has dollar signs. So in order to prove it, I learned a long time ago, in order to solve problems, you have to get money from somewhere. So the good news is there is money. And I know it sounds like we're going to hear more about the septic replacement programs here, but there are grants available to upgrade and replace septic systems. in Suffolk County and then Long Island, which is a real issue. And a footnote and good piece of news related to that is initially the grants were being treated as income and taxable, but that's no longer the case. It seemed like that was a real glitch and a mistake. Yeah. And then I want to tell you about the Environmental Bond Act, which was passed in November. Over 60% of Suffolk County voters voted for the Bond Act. Where I live in Westchester County, across the water, it was over 70%. It's a really incredible moment in New York history. We haven't had an environmental bond act since the 1990s. And this $4.2 billion is going to go to a lot of really important projects. So what we need to do is figure out how to get that money to our communities and to the Long Island Sound region. The second to last bullet is a $650 million tranche of this money, which is designated to go to wastewater infrastructure, municipal stormwater grants, green infrastructure, agricultural nutrient runoff reduction, harmful algae bloom abatement, and sewer line construction. So those all really tie directly into water quality, and we're really excited about trying to leverage these funds. Believe it or not, the applications to get the funds are starting very soon. As of May 3rd, you'll be able to go to the Environmental Facilities Corporation website, esc.newyork.gov, and you'll be able to see the application and the application process. And about $425 million is already being teed up for projects. The governor is going to be going on a listening tour around the state. Not surprising, it starts in Buffalo, but it does specifically say on the website that she's coming not only in New York City, but to Long Island. So we don't have a date or a location, but it's important to go. You can go talk about projects that matter to you or in your community, and you can also hear the criteria and how they're doing, how they're selecting the project. I always like to remind people that the Bond Act got a lot of news and noteworthiness, but it's not the only source of funds that's available. There are other sources, and I know CCE and Save the Sound and Riverkeeper and a lot of the environmental advocates in the state. We've all been to Albany this year testifying to get buckets of money increased for wastewater and infrastructure work in the state. The New York Environmental Protection Fund was $400 million last year. We're trying to get it well as high as we can. We think we're getting it to $435 million, but of course the budget isn't done, and I heard their dreams of being done tomorrow have kind of fizzled, is what I heard today. So anyway, but that's an important bucket, and actually, you know, there's two regional projects here. Save the Sound got a $749,000 grant from PF last year to do a wetland restoration project in Queens. And I understand that the village of Northport got $650,000 to do a green infrastructure project right here to improve the water quality in North Harbor. So congratulations. The reason I laid this out so specifically is because, you know, it's like, you know, some boring lawyer, me, drafted this slide, which is just like a bunch of words, but it's really tangible. The dollars are real. We have to mobilize our communities. We have to tell, you know, our leaders in our municipalities and our counties to apply for this money and to make sure that we're identifying projects, that they're identifying projects and going after it. One other unique feature that's local to this community is the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act, which is kind of a strange, it's not a law, but it's trying to get into the budget, and then it would be a referendum in Suffolk County in the fall to increase sales tax in Suffolk County by 1/8 of a penny. And that money would go into a fund, which would be used to replace septic systems and also to connect businesses and residential folks to the sewers, to the wastewater system, to the sewer system. All of the goal of which is to improve the water quality in the ground and in the sound as well. So that's my presentation. I just, again, you know, my real big focus is just making sure that people understand the challenges and the solutions, and that we're at a unique moment between state and federal dollars right now to try to go and solve these problems. And so that's what I wanted, the message that I really want to send. So thank you.
Hey, great. Maureen Murphy, that's me. Maureen Murphy with Citizens Campaign for the Environment. It's good to be here tonight. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to shift a little, but first I just wanted to spend another few seconds talking about the Environmental Bond Act because it was such a huge victory in New York State, $4.2 billion. And I know that many of you here tonight in this room actually participated in some of the events that we held at the Northport Yacht Club. You know, getting support and getting the word out to remember to flip the ballot over and vote on the Bond Act. So thank you for allowing us to use your facility and participating in those rallies. You know, David went over a lot of different funding streams that are out there, including some state funding streams. But I also wanted to point out that the Long Island Sound funding from the federal budget is also at a record high. This year, we are receiving $40 million from the federal budget to protect and restore Long Island Sound. So that gets divided up between New York and Connecticut. On top of that $40 million in the infrastructure bill was $106 million for the Sound. That's broken up over 5 years. So this year in total, we have over $50 million of federal funding coming to Long Island Sound. And that's important because that money can be used to leverage a lot of the state funding that's out there and a lot of the Suffolk County funding that's out there. So there's lots of money now for restoration and protection. We have to make sure that it goes to the right project. David mentioned this, that there's already been some money that's been released from the Bond Act funding, and that's mostly to go to clean water projects. This was additional state funding that is going to, again, clean water projects. And this is specific to address emerging contaminants in drinking water. So things like PFAS, PFOA, PFOS, and 1,4-dioxane, which I'm going to talk more about. So the problem is 1,4-dioxane. It is an emerging contaminant in drinking water. It is a synthetic chemical. It's called the hidden carcinogen because it's hidden in a lot of different products. It also comes from industry, a legacy, industry that we have. This was a map that we first put together. This utilizes EPA's data. It was back in 2016, so it is a little bit older now. But what you can see here is all the red dots show 1,4-dioxane was detected in the wells at significant levels. In fact, out of the whole nationwide study that the EPA did, they found the highest levels of 1,4-dioxane in drinking water on Long Island. And that was Hicksville. Hicksville had 33 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane in their well. You'll see too that there's, you can't really tell the different colors, but there's yellow dots as well. And that just shows that there is 1,4-dioxane detected in smaller amounts in those wells, but they did find it there. So when we looked at this map, we knew that, some of it directly relates to Superfund sites and legacy contamination, but others were not so clear. There were little hits of 1,4-dioxane. It wasn't a lot, but there was some there. So we started looking at different products. And there was not a lot of research out there on products at the time, but there was some talking about 1,4-dioxane in laundry detergents. So over the course of a few years, 2018 and 2019, we tested over 80 different products. And like I said before, it's called a hidden carcinogen because when you take a product, whether it be your shampoo bottle or your bath soap or even your laundry detergent, and you flip it over and read the ingredients, you're not going to see 1,4-dioxane listed on the ingredients on the label. And that's because it's a byproduct of an ingredient. It happens in the manufacturing process and it becomes a byproduct. So they don't have to list it on the label. So the only way to know if it's there is if you test for it. So we tested over 80 different products and we found most of the products we tested, 80% of them had 1,4-dioxane in them. Some had it at very, very high levels. We tested Victoria's Secret bath gel, which had over 17,000 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane. Tide laundry detergent, 14,000 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane. Even the Dreft baby soap had 10,000 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane. And that's the soap where the doctor, your pediatrician, will tell you, wash your baby's clothes in Dreft. 1,4-dioxane. This research really led to some changes, some significant changes in New York State. And one change was the establishment of a drinking water standard. So there is no national drinking water standard for 1,4-dioxane. There is a health advisory limit of 0.35 parts per billion, but there's no drinking water standard nationally. So, but in New York State, I'm happy to say that there is a standard now. It went into effect, I believe it was 2020. New York State established a drinking water standard of 1 part per billion. We also, at CCE, we worked on legislation. So not only we knew that the product had 1,4-dioxane in it, and we wanted to make sure that the 1,4-dioxane was taken out of the products. So we worked on legislation that would ban 1,4-dioxane in the product. So in your laundry detergent, in your bath soap, in your body wash, your dish soap, your hand soaps. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is Adrienne Esposito, our executive director. This was 10 o'clock at night. She was, at the Capitol watching the vote happen. It was the last day of the session in New York. And we were waiting for the assembly to vote on this piece of legislation that would ban 1,4-dioxane from products. It did pass, and that is exactly when it did pass. She took that picture of herself. So the ban took effect in December of 2022. So it is in effect right now. And the ban says it's a phase-in approach. So in 2022, December of 2022, the limit for products is 2 parts per million or 2,000 parts per billion. Remember, the drinking water standard is 1 part per billion. And then next year it goes even lower. So now, what's happening with all those products that had 1,4-dioxane? Unfortunately, they have asked for a deferral or an exemption from the state law. They need more time to bring their products up to code. There's actually over 1,400 products right now listed as part of the state exemption. This is kind of a breakdown. So you see Procter & Gamble. They have 418 different products on the exemption list. Coty LLC, which if anyone knows of Philosophy, that's, they make Philosophy. They have over 126 products. The Body Shop has over 100 products on the list. L'Oreal has over 86 products on the list. So just kind of taking a closer look of the worst offenders on the list. This liquid detergent has 129 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane. Now, these products are all designed to wash down the drain, right? If you think about it, we use them in the shower, we use them in the dishwasher, we use them in our laundry, and they're all designed to wash down the drain. So especially in a place like Suffolk County, when we have 360,000 septic systems in the ground, that water is getting into the septic system and then leaching out. And I know Dr. Vogler didn't talk about it tonight, but he's done studies that show there is a correlation with the septic system and 1,4-dioxane, linking it back. The Reclaim hard floor cleaner and maintenance, 99,000 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane. Toilet bowl cleaner, really directly down the drain, 75,000 parts per billion, 1,4-dioxane. And there's products on there that I'm sure, all of us have used, whether it's in, my mom called me after Newsday ran the article, and she said, Maureen, I don't know if you saw Newsday, but there's products out there with this harmful chemical, 1,4-dioxane, and one of it's Head and Shoulders, and that's in my bath right now. What should I do? I knew about that Newsday article. But the Body Shop, like I said, 5,800 parts per billion. I'm running out of time, but I just, here to highlight some of the products that we do see every day and that could be in our closets or, was in our shower at one point. Can't forget about the men. You didn't get away. Suave Men Body Wash, 2,400 parts per billion for your Axe body wash. So there's over 1,400 products listed on the list for exemptions, but there's also some that we found suspicious that were not on the list. One of them was Tide. Tide had, 14,000 parts per billion of 1,4-dioxane when we tested it. It's not on the list. So maybe they're in compliance. We don't know. We'll have to follow up and see, but none of the other laundry detergents that we had tested and found 1,4-dioxane are on this list. That one I showed you was really high, but that was really the only laundry detergent. So I'm not sure what's happening with the laundry detergents. So I just wanted to spend the next 5 minutes just telling you about a new study that we're working with Yale University. It's a new collaboration to do a health assessment of 1,4-dioxane here on Long Island. We like to call this the vampire campaign, which I'll get to in a minute. So there's different, exposure assessment technologies. And you'll see here the maps and the models, so they can look at Superfund sites and, look at your exposure through the Superfund site data through different maps. They could do survey work and asking you, what products you used, different questions to follow up on exposure, tap water sampling, publicly available data, whether it be through the EPA or other government agencies, and also urine, a blood draw, hair, teeth. Not going to be asking for teeth. We are going to be asking for blood, hence the vampire campaign. But the project that we're working with is actually, it's 4 different projects happening at once. We are involved with Project 2, Water and Health on Long Island. And this is really to evaluate, exposure to 1,4-dioxane and exposure that you're having. So the goals of the health study is, like I said before, to better understand drinking water and better understand health exposures that we are experiencing. So we are, collecting information for people that do want to participate in this study. And this is what it entails. It would be a home visit to your house, which is about 90 minutes. And this would be with a Yale researcher. You would have to, they would survey about your water use, your health, your consumer care, your personal product use. They would also collect a water sample from your tap water and do a blood draw. So really looking at 1,4-dioxane, again, is it in your blood and what does that, tell, what does that mean? The benefits to you, you get a $20 gift card. But more importantly, you do get the results back. So when they do the water sample, they will tell you, the results of your water sample, the results of your blood sample. And it does help us to understand 1,4-dioxane better. I have one more minute left, and that was my last slide, but I just wanted to say, if you are interested and you want more information, I do have some literature over there, including, Newsday ran 2 articles this week on it, or last week, they're all merging into one now. And there's a handout too with a QR code and a website that you can go to. Or you could go to our homepage, citizenscampaign.org, and there's a link there that you can add your information. And once you add your information into that database, that will go to the Yale researchers, and then they will follow up with you in the next few months. The study has just launched, so it just kicked off this week on Monday. So it is very new. There is a lot of interest, I have to say. Since the kickoff on Monday, we already have over 250 people registered that are interested. They are looking for a large sample size, up to 500 to 700 people to participate. And they are looking, to do a range. They want to look at people with private wells. They want to look at people with public wells. They want to look at people in Nassau and people in Suffolk. So they really want to get a good range of participants. So if you're interested, there's more information over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. We're going to just change the schedule just a little bit. We're going to have Keith Brown speak next. But Maureen, I wanted to say, coming from the beauty industry, the work that you've done has certainly made a huge impact. And anything we do now cannot contain 1,4-dioxane. So it's honestly constant that it's happening. I think you have made a big change. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to see so many familiar faces. I'm New York State Assemblyman Keith Brown. I'm a member of the Environmental Conservation Committee, and I'm a practicing municipal lawyer for the last 27 years. And I just want to thank the Yacht Club for hosting this event, in particular the Women's Committee for doing this. Last couple of years, I've been in the audience sitting where you're sitting. I apologize for going out of order, but my 18-year-old son, he is performing up at the high school. I just ran to see him perform in Symphonic Winds, and I came down here, and now I got to run back up to see him perform in the tour choir. And on top of it, today is his 18th birthday. So I was invited to come down and talk about the Northport Dredge project, but I just want to just tell you all that this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. When I got the nomination to run for assembly, the first 2 phone calls I made was to Adrian Esposito, who was a longtime friend, and also to Tracy Brown from Save the Sound. And I used to take swimming lessons off of Centerport Beach when I was a kid at 8 o'clock in the morning in the freezing cold water. And my kids all either sailed, or my youngest will be sailing this summer here at the Yacht Club. I think it might be his final season, unfortunately. So clean water is something that we all want. It cuts through party lines. None of us want to have the issues that we currently have in our harbor. And the dredge project is very important to me because as a municipal lawyer, it's just a classic case of government ineptitude. Does anybody know the last time the harbor was dredged? It'll take a while to get down.
About 25 years ago.
Longer. Anybody else? 60s, correct. 1965. Ironically, the same year that the Northport Comprehensive Plan was last updated. So, so 57 years ago, right? I mean, it's actually awful that it hasn't been done. And I see Liz Alexander back there nodding her head. So let me just tell you how we got. I want to give you a little history, right? So I got elected. Excuse me, Dan.
I stopped the project
Dan?
25 years ago.
Dan,
Yeah.
it's my turn to talk. When I'm done, you can talk. Okay. So I get elected. I get a phone call from Mayor McMullen and from Ian Milligan. And they invited me down for a meeting with the village attorney. And they said, we have this problem with Northport Harbor and getting it dredged. And we need to talk to you about doing an alienation for Phragmites Park. So I went down, we had about a 2-hour meeting. They went through the whole litany of the fact that in the past 10 years, they haven't been able to get anything going. So I basically, when they finished talking, I said, now remember, I've been doing municipal law for the last 3 decades. I said, well, has anybody filed for a dredge permit? And they looked at me and they said, huh? And I said, well, you need a vehicle in order to ride through, in order to get the government approval, so you can get the approval to actually perform the dredging. And since then, you know, this is a super complicated issue. And this, if you want to know, the channel is actually governed by 3 different jurisdictions. It's federal, closer to the bay. It's Suffolk County Channel, and it's also the town of Huntington Channel. And it actually goes back to the days when the local plant used to be right on Woodbine and right across from, the office used to be right across the street. So, ready for this? 5 layers of government, at least 2 agencies each. We started out, we had our Zoom calls, there's 31 participants in the Zoom call. And Peter's been on them, the mayor's been on them, Don Tesorio's been on them. And we basically spent the better part of the last 2 years looking at the due diligence, looking at, because the issue is not getting the dredging done. Suffolk County's had the money set aside to their credit for the dredging. It can put in any one of the capital year budgets. The problem is what to do with the material that comes up. Many of you may know, Bird Island was created from dredge spoils from 65, and so was, ironically, Phragmites Park. So what to do with it? So we've looked at just about everything, and everything is difficult, and everything costs money, and not an insignificant amount of money. Dredging is very expensive. Most importantly, it's expensive because we really can't do hydraulic dredging, which is basically using a hose and pulling it up. We have to use mechanical dredging, which is more expensive. So we kind of ruled out so far, and Peter, please chime in if I say anything incorrectly. We've ruled out most methods of disposal. The last 3 alternatives we looked at was dumping the material after it comes up, after we put it on a barge, and bring it out to Long Island Sound, which, does that sound like a difficult thing? Yes, because then you need state of Connecticut DEP approval. It's a regulation nightmare. The other idea was to bring it out to the Atlantic Ocean and dump it out there. Similar, very difficult regulatory wise. So basically what we're down to is putting it onto a scow, towing it to Staten Island and disposing it on land. And that's really it. And so what we've done, the town has hired a consultant, an environmental consultant, to look into all of these alternatives and come up with what will be a viable solution. So Phragmites Park and the alienation has been ruled out long ago. So I really don't have a function, but what I'm trying to do is utilize my experience in municipal law and just kind of see this through, because I want to see it through for all the right reasons, right? It's important for navigation, obviously. It's important for commerce, and it's important environmentally, so that, and that's why I'm here talking about it, for water quality. This way, the harbor will flush into the bay and eventually out to the sound. So very difficult problem, not an easy solution, and very expensive. So I'm happy to report, though, that today, the supervisor, and he can talk about it when he comes up here, signed on a proposal to have Nelson Pope and Voorhees begin the permit process. That'll start the engine. You can get around it. So that's the engine that will drive the process. The problem is how to pay for it. So that's where I get to play Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. So, but a great thing happened last November, right? We all passed, New York State passed the Environmental Bond Act. Anybody know, except for Dan Carpenter, when the last time the Environmental Bond Act passed in New York State? What year, Dan?
About 1990.
Good, 1996, right? So what I did was I went back and I researched it and my staff looked it up, because I want to be the first person knocking on the door. I've already been speaking with Steve Engelbright, who's the former chairman. He's no longer an assemblyman, but he's still very active in the environmental community. Steve and I have had a long-standing relationship, and I've been talking to him about not just dredging off the harbor, but a number of projects that I'm going to be looking to tap into the Environmental Bond Act. But the best thing about the bond act being passed, I went back, I did the research. I found out what the DEC was looking for in '96. I've circulated that to all the stakeholders. So like I said, I want to be the first person online when it comes to getting the money. You want to talk about, not an insignificant amount of money. We're talking just for the permit process is 25,000, another 107,000 to do more surveying. And then the disposal cost is somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from $2 to $4 million. So that's where I come in. So I plan on being, that first person online. I have all the application requirements. We're putting that together now and working with, the federal government, Senator Matera, the county government and Stephanie Bontempi, also supervisor, and Garrett Chelius, deputy for maritime, and the village itself. And we're all, I just want everybody to know that, we've been working really well together. We hit a little bump in the road because of the elections, and I had to get Congressman Loda up to speed, which she's now up to speed, had to get Stephanie Bontempi up to speed, she's now up to speed, and Senator Matera. So we're all rowing in the same direction. I only have 2 years to get this done, so time is clicking away. So 2 years because the term of an assemblyman and a senator is 2 years, and a congressman for that matter. So with that, but I cover everything up to date. Yeah. So I guess I'll take a couple questions and then I'm going to bug out of here. So anybody have any questions? Daniel. Surprise, surprise.
Dredging 67 years ago, it was extremely environmentally destructive, destroyed the salt marsh at the head of Northport Harbor. It was very, very environmentally destructive, and I hate to say, maybe we should be using smaller boats instead of bigger boats.
Well, that'll all come out in the wash with the public process. And that's where everyone in this room really comes in. And also, I've already spoken to members of the voting council. It's really important that when we start having those public hearings, to have your voices heard and to tell if there are people who don't want to have it done, because it needs to be done. Enough is enough. 57 years is long enough. Let's get this project going. So at that point in time, I'll be reaching out to the voting council. I've already spoken to the anglers. I've spoken to the shell fishermen. I spoke to just about every stakeholder. By my nature, what I've done in my professional career, I'm a consensus builder. And so my whole goal is to get everyone just like this into one room and build a consensus. So that going forward, we make the best decision possible, based on the best practices that are in effect now. All right? Yes.
You are optimistic. When would this happen?
So I've actually spoken to Commissioner Basil Sagos. We had a Zoom call about a month ago, and I told him this was my priority number one. We talked about 9 other projects so also you got to remember my district, I should have described. My district goes from the Smithtown border to the Nassau border, 60 miles of shoreline of Long Island. So I have 8 other projects going along with it. I told him this was priority number one. I said, when the time comes, I'm going to need your help expediting it, and he assured me he would. So with Commissioner Sagos and with former Assemblyman Steve Engelberg, not to mention, the power of a congressman, a deputy county executive, a state senator, I think we could push this through. So I'm hoping to get it done before this term ends, which will be January of 2 years from now. Yes, sir.
Sounds simple, but I know the answer is probably more complicated.
Nothing is simple.
The draft of it, or follows the details of the dredging in Centerport Harbor.
It's a different project altogether, just like, so what we're hopeful to do, and I've spoken, and the other thing too is, we're gonna have to come back at this 5 years from now. Because everyone knows it's like a bowl, right? So as soon as you dredge it, it's gonna infill on the sides. So when we file the application, I already plan on filing to redo it in 5 years from now. So we don't have to go through the entire process. But this will be a good test case because we have to do the same thing over at Huntington Harbor too. But you first. Sorry. Well, first of all, you can't get not even a big boat. You can barely get a sailboat to Britannia right now. It's that. So I would say navigability. From a commercial perspective, people who want to come and visit, If they have a big boat, they can't get up into the harbor if they have to get to that mooring. And lastly, the flushing of the harbor is very important. Yes, ma'am.
I've got a question. First of all,
Sure.
thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
Was there any discussion of using geotubes, that is filling the spoils with the dredge?
Yeah, it's a great question. So
and
Chick
then bring
Voorhees,
them offshore to prevent further erosion of our shoreline, which is a problem up and down.
it's an excellent question. And with some of the retaining walls that can be built around the harbor, we discussed that. It's called the beneficial use determination from DEC. Based on the conversation we just had last month with Peter's staff. And by the way, there's some really great minds who are working on this project. I mean, Bill Hillman's top notch, Peter's no slouch. By the way, Peter is a former region 1 director, is that right? Right, DEC. So, there's some really great people working on this project, trying to make sure it gets done correctly. But I also want to tell you, one of the main problems that we have is that we have a harbor that's all developed on all sides, right? So, for instance, Peter brought up Belport, which I still have yet to go out to check it out. Oh, Bayport, right? So in Bayport, they had to build 16 high walls on the shore in order to put the material in to dewater it before they can move it. We don't have anywhere we can stage, right? I mean, it'd be great if we could take the parking lot, downtown Northport, but it's just not feasible, right? So, we have to kind of, put that into the mix too. It's like anything else, right? We have a problem, right? It's almost, this is almost like a law school problem, right? Where, we have parameters that we have to deal with, and all these, contingencies that we have to factor into the process. So we've looked at a lot of them. There may be more that comes out during the public vetting process, but that's what the public vetting process is all about. I've been doing secret work, for the last, since 1999. So, okay, so I'm out of time. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. It's great to have you here to get educated. Right?
Well, thanks. Thanks for asking me back, and it's great to see everybody. We've heard a lot of good information tonight. I want to call your attention back to the initial presentations by Dr. Gobler and by David about the causes of the problems that we are facing here, excess nitrogen in our environment caused by septic and septic systems, because that's what I'm really here to talk about. The good news is, what are we going to do about it? The answer is, at long last, we have a plan. Whoops, look at that slide. I hope the rest of them don't look like that. So this is a slide I used to make sure that community groups know that the problem that we're trying to address right now is not a new problem. It's taken decades to develop. Continued reliance on cesspools and septic systems has led to many of the problems that Dr. Gobler has detailed. We know that they are dire. These articles are from Newsday in the 1960s and early 1970s. In 1962, the very first Suffolk County executive, Ashley Dennison, an engineer and a Democrat, generated a report, which I have in my office, to the Board of Supervisors, which was preceded the Suffolk County Legislature, and said we have to do a long-term plan for sewers in Suffolk County, or all sorts of dire things are going to happen to water quality. And we will have been deemed to be negligent by future generations. Sadly, many of the negative impacts are the ones that Dr. Gobler has detailed for us. And subsequent generations of elected officials have kind of kicked the can down the road on this issue. But the good news is, at long last now, we do have a long-term plan. So more than 50 years after that, those articles were published, however, we still have 380,000 cesspools and septic systems in Suffolk County. We know that it has bad impacts for the environment, but also for the economy. We know there are downtown business districts in our county which are saddled with blighted properties and boarded up and vacant stores. in addition to the environmental impacts. Have you seen this slide before? I think this slide was generated by the Nature Conservancy. Dr. Goldberg incorporated it too. It just shows folks how the excess nutrients find their way into surface water. We do have impacts from fertilizer as well, but they're dwarfed by the impact from septic systems. And of course, our fish don't look very happy. So Dr. Goldberg did a good job of detailing what the impacts are that we see around us. I'm not going to go through that, but I don't need to now. Just wanted to make sure people know we're not alone in trying to deal with this issue. It's an issue that's being dealt with all over the globe, and here we see examples from other states in the United States. And we highlighted the language on the right from a clip in Hawaii, talking about what they learned from talking to Suffolk County. And I just want to thank Dr. Goldberg for recognizing how much progress we have made over the past 5 or 6 years. Other states are now calling Suffolk County to ask how we got our program set up so quickly. So the consequences of excess nutrients are multiple, and Dr. Goldberg went through them. Water quality in our bays and harbors is suffering. Lack of sewer infrastructure in our downtowns is holding down businesses. And as Dr. Goldberg pointed out, scientific studies are now looking at the link between chronic low-level nitrate pollution and cancer, which is a little bit scary. And we also know that excess nutrients have caused degradation of wetlands, which protect us against storm surge. They have indications for resiliency in severe storm events. So what does it mean to our economy? We live in a community that is surrounded by water, and it's the reason that many of us came here. That the economic impacts of water resources are just very, very important to our community. They're listed here. I don't need to go through them, but we have a recreational boating economy. You guys are very, very familiar with. We have still have a commercial fishing industry. We have a $3.2 billion tourism economy. I think that number is low. It's probably 6 billion, and none of that is supportable over the long term if water quality continues to deteriorate. So our Suffolk County Clean Water Plan is the solution. It really, it's pretty simple. There are 380,000 systems in the ground that are not designed to treat wastewater. Now, County Executive Malone said early on, it'd be easy when you see that number to just throw your arms up and say, there's nothing you can do about it. He said, no, we're going to do something about it. We're going to create a science-based plan. We're going to establish priorities as to where the most important changes can take place. And we're going to make a little bit of progress every year. He said, it took decades for the problem to get this bad. It's going to take decades for us to solve the problem. We can turn it around in a generation. And so our plan calls for replacing as many of the 380,000 systems as we can, either by connecting parcels to sewers in communities where that makes sense. And there's still communities in Suffolk County where it makes sense to connect parcels to sewers. Many of them are in close proximity to existing sewage treatment plants, which still have available capacity. But there are also vast areas of Suffolk County where sewers can't be a cost-effective solution. And the alternative in those situations is to replace the cesspool septic system with what we call a clean water septic, a nitrogen reducing septic system, innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment systems. There are multiple technologies approved for use in Suffolk County right now, and the exciting work that Dr. Gober is doing at the Center for Clean Water Technology on new nitrogen-reducing biofilters holds great promise for the future. And we need to be able to provide a local match in funding to get the maximum amount of state and federal money we possibly can to Suffolk County to address the nitrogen problem. We talked about the New York State Bond Act, great source of funding, talking about the bipartisan infrastructure law, great source of funding. Neither of those sources of funding are intended to sustain a 5 or 10-year program or a 30-year program of the magnitude that we need to put in place in Suffolk County. Long story short, our clean water plan or subwatersheds wastewater plan calls for the replacement of 177,000 systems in a 30-year period between 2024 and 2054, and 253,000 systems between 2024 and 2069. It's a long-term plan. So the benefits are many. They're both economic, quality of life, property values, public health. Most importantly, restoring the quality of water in our bays and harbors so that we don't have the
the situation that we see in Dr. Gober's map with these harmful algal blooms, which sadly are more prolific here and more frequent here than any place else in the United States. We're going to reverse that. So this is the cover of our clean water plan. It's technically called the subwatershed wastewater plan. You're going to have a little bit tough time reading it, but there are a lot of tributes paid to the plan that was released in 2019. We're most proud of this quote from Dr. Gobler. The hard science that underlies this plan is what he points out, and he says it's inspiring. He says to finally see a plan designed and implemented that will reverse the course of decades of negative trajectories. We're very proud of that quote from Dr. Gobler and for support. So a little bit about the Clean Water Plan. The science-based plan delineated more than 190 individual watersheds throughout Suffolk County, including Northport Harbor, assessed nitrogen loading and sources of nitrogen, and then established nitrogen load reduction goals over time, and established priorities for which areas should see the system replacements first, where sewer connections should happen, and those types of things. And Northport Harbor, as Dr. Gober indicated, is surrounded by cesspools. The sewage treatment plant in Northport, in the village of Northport, is doing a great job. They strongly support the efforts by the mayor and the trustees to expand it to connect additional properties, and they would benefit from our long-term plan. But there are still thousands of cesspools surrounding the bays and harbors in Northport and Huntington Harbor that will never be connected to sewers. And so in those situations, we need to replace the cesspool or septic with a nitrogen-reducing septic system. More about Northport Harbor. There are over 4,900 cesspools surrounding Northport Harbor that discharge in excess of 149,000 pounds of polluting nitrogen a year. And subwatershed plan says that over 75% of the nitrogen pollution going into the harbor is from cesspools. So as a result of that, this area is priority rank 1 under our plan for system replacements. And we're very excited with this close to being able to move the plan forward. So in order to move the plan forward, 2 things are necessary. First, we need an organizational structure to implement the plan. We already have sewer districts in Suffolk County. We have 27 of them. We know how to operate sewer districts, but having 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 of these new clean water septics in the ground is different. No local government has ever done that. We're going to need to have an administrative structure to oversee the installation and maintenance of these systems. One of the things that we've learned in our interactions with governments in other states is that if you do not maintain these systems, they do not continue to perform. And so one of the things that our new countywide water quality district would do would administer the program and make sure that the systems are maintained. And we do need a recurring source of funding on the county side to serve as a local match to make sure we maximize state and federal funding. The goal of the overall plan, as indicated on the right, is to make it easy and affordable for homeowners to upgrade their systems. Can't leave the homeowners footing the bill. A little bit about the clean water septics that we have working in the county. We have an existing grant program, as mentioned earlier by David. We have more than 3,000 homeowners have applied for that. We worked hard to get the IRS to reverse prior determination. We're happy that we were successful there. We're very proud of the program. These systems are in the ground all around the globe. They're kind of new to Long Island, but they're a proven technology and an alternative to sewers. They last for 40 or 50 years. They're a great solution in areas where we're not going to sewer. A couple of photo of them in situ in places where homeowners have planted around them. They're not obtrusive. Some sewer projects that we do have underway right now, because we got grant funding to make these possible. We have big sewer projects underway in Forge River, town of Brookhaven, Carls River, town of Babylon, with post-Sandy resiliency funding. These projects would never move forward if we didn't have a source of funding to make them possible, because the cost of property owners would be too high, it would not be economically viable, underscoring the need for a source of funding to make the projects work. But these are moving forward. Huntington Station, we're working closely with Supervisor Smith and the town board. The County of Suffolk and the town have each pledged $22.4 million of ARPA funding towards that project. Senator Gorn and Assemblyman Stern secured another $22 million in the state budget last year. Engineering work is underway, and we'll be talking to the community and the town about the timeline for construction as it moves ahead. These are projects that can't move forward because we need another source of funding to make them affordable for property owners, which is a key part of our plan. But these communities, many of these communities have been waiting decades for sewers. Communities like Deer Park, Smithtown Business District, Wyandanch and Wheatley Heights, which aren't on the list. So we need, like we said, sewers are very expensive. We need a source of local funding to leverage both bipartisan infrastructure law funding and funding from the Bond Act. We're looking forward to that. David talked a little bit about the Water Quality Restoration Act bill, which is pending in the state legislature. That is the legislation that will allow us to implement our plan. But our clean water plan depends on the funding being available in 2024, next phase of our plan. We meant to put them on the ballot in 2022. Ran into a little turbulence in Albany last year. Are not having that problem this year, thanks to the help and support of groups like Federation of Labor, Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and that's a Suffolk Building creating a tremendous amount of headwind right now. So where should the funding come from? The bottom line is there's no easy way to provide a steady and recurring stream of funding so that each and every year, you know, the money's going to be there. You can have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 15-year plan. Last year, people were talking about the possibility of a fee based on one that they use in the state of Maryland, called the Bay Restoration Fee. Would have imposed a fee of $5 per parcel or $60 a year per piece of real estate. The harder we looked at that, we didn't think it was a good fit for Suffolk County because of the billing mechanism is not there for us. We couldn't simply add it to the property tax bill without property tax implications. So last fall, the stakeholders came together and said, you know, why don't we look at sales tax? People in Suffolk County have voted repeatedly to use sales tax for water quality. And they said, look, there are multiple benefits there. No increase at all in property taxes, absolutely no new fees. Visitors to the county pay a significant portion of the sales tax revenues. An eighth of a penny, which is what they're proposing, is nearly invisible to the average consumer. It's about 12 cents on a $100 purchase. Let's propose the use of sales tax as a recurring revenue stream for wastewater infrastructure that we need to implement the plan. How much money would it generate? A lot of money. In 2024, we projected we'd generate $57 million for the single year, increasing by 2% a year. These are milestone years, 2024, 30, 40, 50, 60. But over the life of the program, it would generate $3.1 billion as the county's local match. Imagine how much state and federal funding we could leverage with that funding source. We're very excited about it. Whole purpose again, to create water quality fund to make sewer connections and clean water septics affordable. We also have sewer systems in the county. I'm not going to waste any time on this. I talked about this last time I was here about the need for us to reform sewer billing in the county. We have a sewer district in Huntington where people in 2022 paid $1,339. $1,339, the average homeowner for sewer. In our next district in Kings Park, they paid $156. Something wrong there. So we're looking forward to reforming the sewer billing and creating a uniform and equitable billing mechanism where everybody pays the same amount for the same service and have a stable and more efficient process. Accountability, the state legislation that would allow us to move forward with the ballot measure this year says that if the funds created by law, the funds could not be used for any purpose other than for water quality infrastructure. Suffolk County Charter now says that any use of funds that is approved by the voters at referendum can only be changed by voters at referendum. And the legislation would also require that a board of trustees oversee the use of the fund and be subject to an annual audit. I'm going to go over a couple of minutes. I apologize. This is a list of some of the groups that have expressed support for the pending legislation and hopefully that will allow us to have a ballot measure this year. This list is outdated. There's probably a lot more groups now in support for the support we're getting from these groups, however, and I'm not going to go with down the list. An article from March 28th indicating that the discussions that are underway in Albany, they call this a sewer bill. It's not really a sewer bill. There's a sewer component to our plan, but there's also nitrogen reducing septics. It's a sewage abatement plan. This is an editorial that Newsday published after we released the Clean Water Plan in 2019, talking about how, you know, we can turn the ugly tide. They say, yes, this is a long-term plan. We can do this in a generation. Particularly interested in this paragraph we pulled out and stacked on the left, saying it's time to take a stand. Lawmakers should either let Suffolk County residents vote on the county's proposal to fund war nitrogen or offer their own plan. Either silence or obstruction are options. And right now, as David indicated, there are discussions underway in Albany about the state legislation that would be required in order for the county to put up a ballot measure this year, asking folks whether they are interested in investing an eighth of a a cent of sales tax to implement the very first long-term wastewater infrastructure plan in the county's history, and give the Suffolk County Legislature credit. On March 17th, 2020, they unanimously approved the plan. We're this close to implementing it. We're hoping we're going to get that opportunity. Thanks for having me.
So we have one more speaker tonight on our panel, it'll be our Supervisor Ed Smith.
Well, good evening, everybody. I promise I'll be brief because there's not much I can add to this. Certainly not on a technical side. That I think all the topics have been covered. And I do have quite a few pages that I promise I'll be reading the headlines of. I think the big takeaway tonight is that infrastructure is everything. We live on a sandbar. Like, I think glacial moraine is probably more accurate, but we live on a sandbar, and with that comes a need for infrastructure. And one of the things that our administration has been working on endlessly is infrastructure. They're working with Andre Sorrentino, the highway superintendent, on doing that. But once the professional wrestling side of politics is over and the campaigns are over, I can tell you that behind the scenes, all of us in town government are working together. It's a very well-run, well-organized board. Everybody is working with each other to get these infrastructure projects done. One of the things that Peter Scully mentioned was the $22 million that was dedicated to the sewer project in Huntington Station. And it's I think a great example of working vertically with government, where the town board 2 years ago, I think it was, we voted unanimously to take the entirety of our ARPA funds from the federal government and dedicate it all towards a sewer line that's going to run roughly from the train station south to Jericho Turnpike, where it's going to connect with existing sewer lines, and also to retrofit sewer lines that are in the ground currently that are of varying sizes and in need of repair. But that's one of the themes, or one of the important parts of this, is that we do have a lot of infrastructure needs for new infrastructure, but we also have a lot of infrastructure needs for existing, to refit and repair existing infrastructure. We are proud of our state-of-the-art sewage treatment plant in Hale site, and we spend millions of dollars every year upgrading it and keeping it in top performing. But it's got a 103-year-old network of pipes. Many of them are clay in the ground, feeding that state-of-the-art sewer system, sewage treatment plant. So those are the kind of things that we are addressing. And another overarching theme you've heard is money. Government is about money and who gets it. That's it. I mean, my job, and nobody told me this part of the job, is my job is to go out and get money for the town. It is, and I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Jillian Guthman, and sitting there, who's my favorite person in town. He's the receiver of taxes. So, nobody collects your taxes better than Jillian does. But she collects it, we spend it, and I will tell you that what we are all focused on. It's been a buzzword for the last several years in the public discourse and governmental discourse, political discourse. Infrastructure. It's all about infrastructure, and what happens upland either runs into the drinking water or into the waterways. And as I've said repeatedly, that every community on Long Island is a waterfront community. It is. You're never so far from the water that you're not a waterfront community, and that's the mindset I think that everybody on Long Island has to start adopting, regardless of how far they think they are from the water. Everybody's in a waterfront community. On a very, very local level, and I have to point out our, as I call him, the Vice Lord of the Admiralty, our Deputy Maritime Director, Garrett Chelius, who's been doing a great job. Just recently, the sugar kelp farming operation was, as a pilot program, was very successful. So that I'm not going to get the technical, but a lot of sugar kelp was harvested in the harbor successfully, and I think over the next couple of years, we're gonna expand that as well in Huntington Harbor. And also, it was mentioned earlier, we do work very closely with the Cornell Cooperative, with the Flupsy program, with shellfish, with oysters and the clams, and doing a spat on shell program, which is being run here in Northport Harbor. There's another one over at Gold Star County Beach by Contra Hall. It's a very effective way of cleaning water, and with each passing year, the program is getting bigger and bigger, and we're looking forward to doing that. So I'm not going to keep you too long, because I know I'm the 1, 2. We got 5 speakers here, and I follow Keith Brown, so one of my favorite people, but man. This is being recorded, you're not gonna see this, but after following Keith Brown, I'm gonna keep my remarks short, but I will tell you that it's, you know, the big takeaway for this administration, I say, the administration meaning all of us on the town board, the highway superintendent, Andre Sorrentino. I'll throw Andrew Ray, the clerk, in there too. He, you know, everybody is on board for infrastructure, and Julian Guffin, you know, keep collecting the taxes so we can spend it more on infrastructure. So with that, thank you. I'll take some questions. Oh.
So we're gonna take questions and answers in just a minute. We're gonna get a microphone to come around. I'm gonna ask, please, 2 things. If you could state your name before the question, and if you're from any affiliation, just so you have an idea, and then direct the question directly to the person that you'll be speaking to. But before we do that, we're gonna bring up 2 people from the village, just to say a few words. So Mayor Koch and David Weber.
And I would like to thank Suffolk County for this important water quality presentation and creating awareness for our local communities. Northport is a historic maritime village, and Suffolk County has our unwavering support for the Reclaim Our Water program. The village has frequent calls with Peter Scully, the Suffolk County Deputy Executive, to discuss our village's sanitary system extension and benefits of alternative on-site wastewater treatment systems to improve water quality for our residents. In the village, water quality and the health of our harbor is a priority. Our recent success to secure grant awards for water quality has the village engaged in a $5 million sanitary system extension and a $3.6 million stormwater infrastructure project. Northport is working together with Suffolk County to reclaim our water. Thank you.
Hi, Dave Weber, trustee of Northport Village, and I oversee the wastewater treatment plant as well as the docks and waterways here. And I'm very passionate about the waterways. Obviously, I own a business that thrives on recreational boating. So I just wanted to go over a couple of our past projects and some of the projects that are going on now that are going to improve the quality of the water. First, I do want to thank the Women's Committee for continuing this and inviting us back year after year, and for all the initiatives that you started with sustainability and giving passion to the other yacht clubs to do the same thing, kind of almost competing with them. I'm not going to say that you're competing with them, but we know that Northport's, you know, far better than the other yacht clubs around. So it was about 10, 12 years ago, actually, with previous mayor, well, a couple mayors back, Mayor Dahl, who really pushed to upgrade our sewer processing plant. And with those upgrades and improvements, we were able to double the capacity of the sewer plant. So with that, now we can start to connect houses. And that process has been a little slow. First off, we ran into some issues. We didn't have the right contractors potentially, and funding was an issue. Suffolk County, New York State stepped up, gave us the funding available. We found the experts for the projects, And we found the solutions to continue that project. So starting June 1st, we're going to be connecting 22 houses right behind us here along Bluff Point. Obviously, the houses that are along the waterfront are the most important, and then we'll start gradually working our way back. I don't know if we're lucky or unlucky to be in that best region here where we actually really need the infrastructure in the ground so that the sewer doesn't leach, and it goes to our treatment plant and we process it. So some of the things that the plant's doing, they're upgrading, adding screening, additional screenings. We're continually improving the plant, modernizing it, and that way, when we do add these extra houses, we can keep up with the flow. Right now, we are also running a FLUPSI program, which has been running for the past 3 years. We've released 300,000 oysters into the harbor, adding with Huntington's probably 500 or maybe close to 1 million now. They are thriving out there. We sent a diver down last year to took pictures, and it's amazing what they've started out there. And they started out this big, but they're full-size oysters now, and they process 50 gallons of water every day. So we're going to continue that with the under the mayor and our board. We're definitely going to make sure that we continue that and add to it. So this year we're teamed up with the Rotary, who's been doing a project in Huntington. I believe they started last year. They're going to bring that program over here where they're going to be also growing oysters. We found that they do like our harbor, probably because of the clean water. With Northport Yacht Club advocating and pushing for sustainability and clean water, I think that education, as you educate your families, you educate other yacht clubs, we can build on this and continue to make it grow, because we all benefit from this, and we want our kids to be able to, and our grandkids to be able to benefit from the clean water, because we're the ones that made it dirty. So let's clean it up. Again, there's a lot of great projects, doesn't happen without money, so you can pass the word around. I know Ed over there is always willing to write a check. You said that many times. So we're still waiting for it, I guess. But I wanted to thank everybody again for coming down, and have a good night.
So to take a question, please line up right down the middle pathway, but I want to say, I think this is the best panel that we've had yet, and we're honored to have you here today. So thank you very much.
Yeah, evening. I don't know if I need a microphone or not, but I will use this anyway. Don't exactly know who to direct my question to, but now I understand that the nitrogen levels in our drinking water is a little bit high. And I'm just wondering to myself what Suffolk County Water can do to possibly filter it out across the line. Technology that is available. Really?
There is technology, but it is very expensive. And so, I mean, I don't know, from Suffolk County Water Authority here, they're a very progressive water purveyor, and that anytime that levels get to 1/2 of federal regulations, they take action. Right, and so, and if you saw the levels that I put up, 5 milligrams per liter, it's the level, that's probably because they've done efforts to get those levels, to get the nitrate levels down to 5, which is half of the standard. But treatment is expensive, and sometimes beyond just treating for it, they'll just do things like just mix it in different water supplies. But again, I think the real upshot is also all the efforts are going on here to get the nitrogen, to get it at the source as well. So.
Okay, and the other thing is there anything that can be done on a local household basis that makes any kind of sense to you?
Yeah, upgrading septic systems and cutting fertilizer.
I don't use it. Well, that's
I just wanted to add too, that a lot of the funding that we talked about in the beginning, including Bond Act funding, has gone to Suffolk County Water Authority to upgrade treatment for drinking water, including removing chemicals like PFAS and 1,4-dioxane. And part of the health study that Yale is doing is to look into different ways, and actually part of it is to look into how we can filter some of these hard chemicals like 1,4-dioxane in the home. Is there treatment technology that can be developed that can do that?
Thanks to, just follow up on that Scott's question, there's something like a Earth's osmosis, water for your home, sorry. Does that take out the nitrates and or the dioxide, you know?
1,4-dioxane is really hard to filter out. In fact, you need, it's called advanced oxidation technology, or AOP technology, which is very expensive, like Dr. Vogler said. The other contaminants can be filtered out using a carbon-based filtration system. So we don't recommend, not nitrate, but PFAS chemicals. So we don't have any recommendations on filtration systems, but they are filtered through a carbon-based. And I don't know what that.
Yeah, I think you can, reverse osmosis can get down nitrate levels, but not entirely. Thank you.
Again, if you could state your name and who you're asking the question to.
My name is Daniel Carpin. I'm a well-known professional engineer. The fastest way we can reduce nitrate levels in the groundwater in Suffolk County is very simple. 2 words: eat less meat.
My name is Kevin Barry. I'm a resident of Northport Yacht Club. How long does it take for water to get from the surface, like it's gonna rain this weekend? How long does it take to get from there into that water table, and then coming out of my faucet, or, and is it any quicker flushing my toilet, and then how long does it take to get into the water that I drink? So how long of a lag is there gonna be between these mitigation, efforts and, the effects that we'll be able to see in the water that we use? So I'm not an engineer, and I'm gonna pass it down to Dr. Go, who's a little bit more technical than I. But how quickly contaminants reach surface water or groundwater is determined based on where your location is, right? So the closer you are, surface water and groundwater, obviously, right? So what the subwatershed wastewater plan concludes is that we could reverse the negative trajectory within 10 years and turn the corner. And what Nature Conservancy is sort of fond of saying, because they've been doing outreach with us, that their scientists are constantly reassuring them that if you remove the insult, the natural system will recover. And the important thing is to remove the insult.
So, and in fact, Peter showed actually a map showing that actually you show a lot of things, but there were these concentric semicircles around, and so the red area that he showed was, I think, 2 years or less, and the next one's 2 to 10 years, and then, so again, you move further away, it takes longer for it to get there. But, I would think in some cases, things are getting to drinking water wellheads even faster. So, so depending on where the home is relative to the wellhead, so public wellhead, So, but water, and I can also say that your other question, water moves down vertically very quickly. So, from surface down to the water table doesn't take very long. And it's slower in the horizontal, right? Gravity is working this way. So that water moves down quickly, takes longer to move out.
Hello, I'm Kim and I work for Save the Sound, so I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because I could ask any number of my colleagues and biologists on staff this question, but it's another filtration question. So if you have a well, which I do, and you happen to know that one of your neighbors has a septic system that's leaching, and you have a UV filter and your refrigerator filter, Are you still screwed, or is that actually doing something?
I gave you this one to get a lawyer.
One piece of good news is that when it comes to like biological contaminants, you're in good shape, and the county has rules that, you know, it needs to be the well and the septic systems that need to be separated by 200 feet. Right, and so, and that's because actually sand in our aquifer does an incredibly good job actually of retaining things like bacteria and viruses. However, then there's the chemicals, and you know, really, I would just say if you have a private well, it's so important that you get your water tested regularly. So you're just tracking everything and you know where things stand. I can say actually, the home I'm in now, I moved in 2005, and I only got public water 2020. But in those years, those 15 years, I saw the nitrate levels of my drinking water rise, and they rose from about 2 to 4 to 6 and above 6, and then finally, thankfully, where I was, they brought in public water. So test, if you have a private well, test is very important.
Thank you. Another question?
So I'm a member of the Northport Yacht Club and member of Huntington Beach Community Association. So you talked about Huntington, you talked about Northport, but I wanted to ask a question about Centerport Harbor and our mill pond. And it seems like it's an ongoing issue, but I know it involves both Suffolk County and the town of Huntington. And the Cornell Co-op, because my memory is 25, 30 years ago, was that Cornell did a big study on the dam and the opening of the dam to keep the waters flushed out so that the main harbor would remain swimmable, but we could have a perpetual high tide and mill pond for the restaurants at their most key times. But it seems now that the dam is mostly shut, which is going to lead to a highly polluted mill pond. And, you know, somebody was supposed to maintain this, and I don't understand what's happened in the interim, because it's only the last few years. Does anybody have an answer?
Hi, so I was down there today, and I checked it.
So I am the keeper of the gates. And what's happened over time is, so the gates, it was a mill pond a million years ago. And the businesses back in the 70s wanted a pond for the weddings and so forth. And what's happened over the years, which I've recently inherited last year, is we try to find a symbiosis where we can have weddings where the brides can have water in the pond, but we can also open the gates during the week to let it flush, and we can have no bunker kills, no stinky algae in the pond, and all like that. The reason why you say that they've been closed is in the winter, algae doesn't grow. So we usually use like April 15th, when the water hits 50 degrees, is when we start locking the gates. So on Monday, I chained them so they would remain open, so you get a full flush. And today, I unchained them, so for the weekend, there'll be water in the pond, and then it's tidal dependent. So at the next high tide on either Monday morning or Monday afternoon, I'll chain them again. One of the problems we have, and this is a more recent development, is since the Canadian geese are no longer necessarily migratory, and they gather in that upper pond behind the eagle's nest.
Yeah.
When we get a big storm event, a lot of that storm surge overflows into the mill pond. So that's another reason why we want to keep opening them and closing them. But you know, it's always going to be, you know, some people are going to say it's not open enough, and other people are going to say it's open too much. So we try to strike a balance there, but they'll be open regularly each week for the rest of the year.
Very good. That's all I want to hear.
Sure.
My name is Kristen Wendell. Nobody's spoken about that. Everybody's spoken about this. Nobody has spoken about that. I want to know why you're not banning this.
Sure, the question was, why are we not banning pesticides? So I think that, part of it was we only had 15 minutes, so it's hard to talk about everything. But we actually are working on a statewide bill, it's called the Birds and Bees Protection Act, and that would ban some of these harmful pesticides, especially on the seed coatings. So it would ban neonics like imidacloprid, which we have detected in Long Island's drinking water and groundwater. And we are working on that bill actively right now in Albany.
So just to make clear that local government efforts to control pesticide use have not been effective because they're preempted under state law and only the state can regulate pesticide use. So there have been concerted efforts to try to ban certain substances, and CC's been at the forefront of that. You've probably seen recent coverage that shows that on a statewide basis, there's more pesticides applied in Suffolk County than any other county in the state.
And Assemblyman Chris Burdick in Westchester has also introduced legislation this year, which goes to that issue as well, to ban certain pesticides in wetland areas, subject to the DEC's ability to preempt that if it's an invasive species. So there's probably more pieces of legislation about this issue than we realize, but people are trying.
And I'll just add one more thing, because Suffolk County does have a phase out program on all their county properties. And they've really been very good at phasing out unnecessary use of pesticides. And if you want to use pesticides on a Suffolk County piece of property, you actually have to go to the committee and request permission to use the pesticide. Since 1999, it just came to me.
Michael Carr from Ashbrook and Eaton Stack. This has really been riveting and eye-opening. It's the first one I went to. You've got a really big problem, as I see it. And the problem is that if I were to call up a random 50 people in Carmack or East Northport or somewhere and ask them about what was discussed here, they would have no clue what I'm talking about. There's just an ignorance about this on Long Island. And I think that's really the big problem in terms of getting funding, and people talked about that. I think it's about getting people aware of this and getting the groundswell, and then you get the funding. If you're just in a dark corner somewhere doing great work, and you are doing great work, but the people at large don't really know about it, I think it's going to be very difficult to get the funding. This is absolutely fantastic. I think there needs to be an educational push on it. Because we're just a very small group here. This has been fantastic, but I mean, this is, 200 people out of, what's the population of Long Island, 3 million or something, right? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I don't know. Yeah.
Pushing that, how far talk about that. So we use that as an opening to talk to people. We can't hear you.
I just went back to using the phrase that every community is a waterfront community on Long Island, and use that as an opening to talk about this issue with folks who may live in Dix Hill, or may think, oh, I live too far from the water, it doesn't affect me, but it does. And in this room, we know why. But as the speaker just said, a lot of people don't think of it the same way. And it matters. Never more than 15 minutes in either ocean or sound.
Actually, that last question leads me to my closing remarks. We could still take another question, but thank you for being here to hear this and learn about this and spread the word. And the thing I find most interesting is that we're all aligned. We're all working together year on year on year. I just see things getting better and better and more communication. So from when we started this in 2014 to now, I've seen such a huge impact and greater education. Yes, we could do it more, but I'm so pleased that you came tonight. Please come forward if you have another question.
If 75% of the nitrogen runoff is coming from our septic system, where's the 25? How much of that is all our nitrogen-based fertilizers that we're still using, and not, all over the island?
Yeah, you're right. The other, number two is fertilizer. And so that's significant and, you know, every community is different. So we're Northport 75% wastewater and the fertilizer is probably something around 20% or so.
So all of the plans that were up there that are long-term, that look fantastic and they're gonna cost a ton of money. Isn't something like banning the synthetic fertilizers in our power to just do? It doesn't
Yeah,
cost any money to
well,
stop it.
two points on that front. One, I think people are working on that at the state level, and it does need to be at the state level. But two, actually for Northport, if you look at the county's clean water plan, the reductions in nitrogen needed, if fertilizer went away and went to zero, it still wouldn't be enough. So that's why, so
But it's something.
it's something, and so it's, yes, it's very important, but actually, like I said, if there was never another pound of fertilizer put down in Northport, it still wouldn't be enough, and that's why we have to hit the 7.
No, I understand we have to do something, but I just feel like sometimes we turn a blind eye to all the little ways that we can chip away at it. But anyway, thanks.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I think Jackie Martin, did you want to come up and say something about citing voting council activities?
I am so sorry. Everybody's been so wonderful. Adding good timelines. This is kind of important too. Hi, everybody. An old lady with my hand out there. I'm the executive officer of the Greater Huntington Council of Yacht and Boating Clubs, which has now changed its name to the Greater Huntington Boating Council, thankfully. And it's going to take me a while to get rid of that. But I just wanted to thank the panel. We sponsor this also with the Northport Yacht Club Women's Committee, and we're very proud to do that. There are many things that we have been working on with water quality as well with our legislators, and there are a lot of things that the Boating Council does, but I won't go into them now, that you're probably not aware of. The most important thing I want to tell you about for the immediate future is that we are having our Safe Boating Week, May 20th to the 26th. We have a number of wonderful classes and lectures that we're presenting, and we have a website that you can go to. It's huntingtonsafeboatingweek.com. And we have vessel safety checks. There's quite a number of things going on, and we are partnering with a number of agencies, including the town of Huntington, to produce our Huntington Waterfront Festival, which we haven't had the past 3 years due to COVID. And that will be at Mill Dam Park on Sunday, May 21st. And we will actually have maritime services there, as well as Northport and Huntington Rotary with their oyster reef program, the sugar shell program, seaweed program. They'll have live tanks and demonstrations. So if you want to see what you've been hearing about tonight in real time, please come. That's 6 of our vendors there, and we'll have over 100 vendors, including about 10 of our member clubs who will also have booths there. So we have a very strong maritime presence, and we hope that you will join us on Sunday, May 21st, and then go to the classes during the week. And we wrap up our week right here at Northport Yacht Club for our Meet the Commodores event, where all of the clubs come together, introduce the Commodores, have a roll call, and install the officers for our next year for the Boating Council. So thank you so much for just staying a couple extra minutes. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, and I'd like to have another round of applause for our experts in our field. Thank you, everybody.